I asked Bob Pollock to call me back here this morning to answer a couple of questions for me because, these are questions that have come up. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Bob, good morning again.
Good morning.
And thanks for coming back.
You're welcome. No problem.
Okay. Here are the questions. First of all, I just sent you somebody brought me in this, and I violated protocol by going ahead and taking it. He sent me a little container that has some insects crawling around in it. He wanted to know, are these termites or are they flying ants? And you had a very detailed explanation of why these are not termites.
Yes.
I'll hold them to the microphone so everyone can see.
Yeah, hold them up there. Yes, so those particular insects, they're black, but they have three distinct body parts. So they have head, thorax, and abdomen. Mm-hmm. All right, and there's a constriction between each one of those body parts. Mm-hmm. So that helps us identify that that's an ant.
Okay.
And of course, there's various types of ants. When we get into the largest ants, then largest black ants, and I can't quite tell the size from the picture.
These are not big.
Because there's little black ones, and then there's big black ones. The big black ones can be carpenter ants, mm-hmm. And then those tend to nest in decaying wood. Yeah. So that could be a stump outside where they have their nest and are living, and then they just
this was actually at the guy's church, but there you go. That's the explanation.
Okay.
These are not termites. Yep. Termites have a single abdomen, correct?
Yeah, so they'll have a head, and then there'll be a little bit of a constriction, and then they'll have the rest of the body will be solid. And they're pretty small. And this time of year is when we can see both forms, both ants and termites can have wings.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And they'll be flying around because it's mating season. So they'll be trying to mate, and then the females will go off and start a new colony.
Yeah, and of course you want to fly around if you're trying to mate.
That's right. That's right. You want to be mobile.
Socially distancing doesn't apply to ants. Okay, here's the real reason that I wanted to talk to you, and this can go in several directions. But bottom line is, somebody was saying that they were at a garden store and they were told by the people there, you know what, you better get your stuff now because of coronavirus, more and more people than ever are planting gardens. And so that raises a number of issues. And as you said to me, yeast is becoming a big thing because more people are baking now and they can't find yeast in the stores.
Yeah, who would have thought there'd be a shortage of that?
Yeah.
So it's these kind of things that we don't expect to be short, or we don't think about that. And I'm not sure why yeast is short, other than if we bought it all up. So then where is it in the supply chain?
Well, I got an answer for that.
Good.
I actually found an online article that popped up on my feed the other day, just the same day I was told about this yeast thing. And as it turns out, the process for making the yeast, there are only 3 plants that do it in the entire eastern seaboard, and maybe for the entire nation, I don't recall. But 2 of them have coronavirus problems. And third, getting the yeast cultures, it takes about 10 days to make a batch of yeast and a little bit longer than that, and they just did not expect this kind of an overwhelming response. Normally at this year, this is their slow time of the year, and then when you get toward the fall, people start baking again, so they weren't prepared.
Yeah.
So
I think there's things like that. Well, it was the same thing with toilet paper. You know, articles came out then about the fact that there's limited facilities that manufacture that, and so then that when we hoard it all, then that causes issues in the supply chain. Yeah. But going back to plants,
yes,
yes, I think there is a general feeling that there is increased interest in planting gardens this year. So hopefully, I know some local people have been trying to think ahead and grow transplants and especially vegetable plants, trying to anticipate the demand for that and have them available. So that's a good thing. And really we'll finish this train of thought here. Spring is really the push for that. So a lot of those vegetable transplants get produced in the spring, and then once we get into late May, early June, then that kind of shuts down, and the availability of those plants kind of stops for the most part. Now,
Yeah.
you might find some growers that will continue to grow a few things, to have them available to replant, or to plant, for people to plant multiple plantings.
Yeah.
But that's a much more limited number of crops, because usually we've got our cool season crops, so those onions and the peas and the spinach and the cabbage, and broccoli and cauliflower, beets and radishes, those fit into that cooler season crop for the most part. So we tend to have those available in the spring. And then many of those you can also plant later summer to get a fall crop.
Yeah.
Because, again, we're going to start to cool down later in the year. And those have a short enough growing cycle that we can get 2 crops of those in a growing season here.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things about that is that generally the gardens are not dry enough yet to do a lot of planting, and so we're forced to wait until, and I generally don't get the entire garden in until Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
But if I have to get those plants now, then I'm going to have to be really careful about keeping them alive and strong in order to transplant them maybe a month down the road.
Yeah, and you don't have to get all those right now, because they'll start to phase that in too. Typically, they won't have very many of the vine crops, for example.
Cucumbers and things.
Or even, and cucumbers, and they'll have some tomatoes that you can pop in early, but then they'll still have those coming on, because a lot of those, unless you have a way to protect them from a potential freeze that we could get, and it's hard to know this year what's going to happen with that, when that's going to be. Typically, Memorial Day is that kind of time frame that we've thought about for years. That's our cutoff point, and after that, we're safe to plant all those warm season crops. But last year, we did not have a freeze.
Yeah.
So we had a much bigger window to plant things and keep them safe.
Yeah. One other question about all of this, and there are other questions, but only one that I'll really have time for. And questions such as wanting to get my canning supplies now and things of that nature. But here's the question: for folks who have not traditionally planted a garden and maybe never have a garden, they're going to have to get their ground ready. And I know you can't spend an entire segment on this because we only have a couple of moments left, but what are the resources and where are the resources people can find on preparing a plot of ground for gardening for the very first time?
Yeah, and they can call and talk to us at 465-3880. And right now, of course, you call, leave a message, and then leave your phone number, or send us an email, and we will get back to you. And there's a number of resources, and we have a ton of stuff in our gardening section at extension.psu.edu under the Master Gardener banner. In fact, they've been doing webinars now on kind of victory gardening, because they've also anticipated that there'd be an increased desire to do that. So they've had a series of articles as well as some webinars that folks can watch to go through that.
Yeah,
and there's a number of online resources to get started. But yeah, it does take some effort. This year, so far, we're almost 6 inches above normal on rainfall or precipitation from the beginning of the year till now. No surprise based on the last several years. But that does make it a challenge to get in and get the soil work. So that's where raised beds this year could be an advantage, especially depending on the soil type that you have in there. If it's very workable, you might just have to touch it up, move it around a little bit, and plant.
Yeah,
so,
well, there's somebody calling you right now to say, hey, Bob, do I have to turn this ground over or can I work it? And a lot of people are planting in pots now, too, which is an interesting whole new way to do it.
Yes, definitely, and that's another way to deal with the wet weather and not being able to get into the regular soil, but to do containerized plantings, at least to get started, or to keep things on schedule to get those early season crops in sooner or on time. You could start them in pots and then transplant them later.
All right, there you go. That's a little bonus section with Bob Pollock. Thanks for doing this for us today.
You're quite welcome.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
There he is, and a little extra gardening section there for you here on Indiana in the Morning. You'll hear on